why is the cloud so important to enterprises these days? Why are organizations moving to the cloud? What's the motivation here? Because maybe some people listening are like, cloud, why should I bother?
Right, that's true. And in my journey, honestly, I have also faced that dilemma. I built a new product a few years ago, and so that gave me a pretty good perspective as to when I started enumerating my options. I realized that what are the key benefits of going into the cloud, on the cloud. So
welcome back to the show. I'm here with Ashish Garg. He's the VP of, not VP, Director of Engineering. Sorry, gave you a promotion there accidentally.
Thank you so much.
We're going to be talking. Yeah, you're welcome. And maybe you will after this podcast, because this is an exclusive look at ColdFusion 2020 roadmap. And we're going to be looking at all the exciting features that are coming up in 2020. First time that you're going to hear about this. We'll look at some of the cool multi-cloud stuff, microservices, major improvements in deployment, containerization, monitoring, logging, all kinds of cool things. So welcome, Ashish.
Thank you so much, Michaela. Glad to be here.
You're welcome. And if you haven't heard of him, he's actually been with Adobe for 15 years, beavering away, writing, in charge of teams for several successful products there. And now he's with ColdFusion. And I think you did a lot of JRun in the past too, didn't you? Weren't you on that product? So
yeah, that's true. So JRun is still one of my favorite products I ever worked on in my career. So I worked on JRun for 4 years, and I'm proud to say that I still remember the code. I can still look at the code and debug it. So it was like really the best time of my technical career, like when I was coding, when I was doing like coding day in, night out type of stuff.
Oh yeah, you're not allowed to code anymore?
I wish. Yeah, you can say that I'm not allowed to code anymore, but I wish I could code more. It's not so much. And yeah, the developers don't want me to code because for obvious reasons that they have to wait on me. And yeah, let's just stop there on the coding.
Yes. So, but you're in charge of the whole ColdFusion engineering team.
Yes, that's correct.
So the buck stops with you about making sure ColdFusion 2020 works wonderfully and does all these amazing things.
Right.
No pressure.
No pressure. Absolutely.
So I think we should just start off. I know you have this really exciting vision for ColdFusion 2020. So
right.
Tell us, maybe you can just say what the vision is, and then we'll talk more in detail about what it means.
Sure. So, and I'm just quoting it word by word. So the ColdFusion 2020 vision is to be the modernized platform of choice for building cloud-native microservices application with an absolute focus on ease of use without getting locked to a particular cloud vendor. So this is the vision. And if we just break it down into different parts, it actually means a lot. It basically is a quantum leap from where ColdFusion is today and where it can be. So the way I look at it is, and again, as I said, like say, I was associated with JRun, and hence I was associated with ColdFusion in my early career. So I remember when ColdFusion 6 came out, that was a quantum leap at that time because it moved from C++ implementation of ColdFusion 5 to Java implementation of ColdFusion 6. And at that time, the territory, the galaxy it entered was J2EE. So all the developers who were working on ColdFusion, in one shot, they became J2EE developers, and that was a big deal at that time. And it was a quantum leap. It was a total change of model. It was even total change of the target where ColdFusion could be applied. So not just developing small to medium applications, but ColdFusion could be used to develop enterprise grade applications. So this vision is taking ColdFusion to the next level, to the cloud. So in one step, we want to upgrade all the ColdFusion developers or all the ColdFusion application, not just enterprise ready, but cloud ready as well. The applications should be able to take advantage of the cloud. The developer should be able to upskill themselves to be cloud developers. So that's a massive vision that we are committing to ourselves, or committing ourselves to for the next year.
That is very exciting. So, I know cloud is very hot in the enterprise right now.
Right.
I think you did a survey that showed maybe 70% of enterprises are moving into the cloud for their apps.
Right.
I may have got that number slightly wrong, but it's a lot of people are moving into the cloud.
It's a lot of people, and it's a lot of people who are moving into the cloud. And actually, the survey that we did, it was based on today, and what some of the people are planning for till the end of next year. So based on that, more than 3/4 of all the enterprises would move to the cloud in one way or other. Either they will like totally move to the cloud, or they will have a hybrid model wherein some part of it is in their cloud, in their data center, but some part of it is being used from the cloud platforms. 3/4. It's a massive shift. Like happening over a 3 years, 4 years time period. Assuming that the wave has already started, it's a massive shift that we are seeing, and we are aligning ourselves with that.
That's great. And I'll put a slide in here in the show notes that gives those statistics and graphs of cloud adoption that you talked about.
Yeah.
I got those slides from the talk you gave at CF Summit East, which was a great talk. Unfortunately, you didn't have enough time there to talk about CF 2020. So that's why I was really excited to get you on the show to talk about all the cool features that are coming up. And also just for anyone listening who's going to CF Summit West in Las Vegas, I know you're going to be giving a whole keynote on this topic, but this is a chance to get a sneak peek at all the exciting stuff that's coming up. But I'm sure you'll go into even more detail at CF Summit in Las Vegas.
Sure.
So I think before we go into the details of all the technical features, maybe we should just back up a minute and just ask, why is the cloud so important to enterprises these days? Why are organizations moving to the cloud? What's the motivation here? Because maybe some people listening are like, cloud, why should I bother?
Right, that's true. And in my journey, honestly, I have also faced that dilemma. I built a new product a few years ago, and so that gave me a pretty good perspective as to when I started enumerating my options, I realized that what are the key benefits of going into the cloud, on the cloud. So the first factor, and that's a very common factor that, is the cost. So when I go on the cloud, you pay like a utility bill. You don't buy something. You don't have to spend so much of money to get all the machines and everything that you need. So first and foremost, like, in a traditional sense, it's called capital expenditure versus the operational expense. So you don't have to invest your lot of capital into buying the hardware, buying the software, and the cost of starting is so high. So you just get started very lean. You can get started very, very easy, and you don't have to worry too much about it, like all the approvals and all.
Well, and I think related to that it's more flexible. It's not just that you don't have to spend tens of thousands of dollars on server hardware up front, but you don't have to get the number of servers right up front either.
Right. And that, sorry, something happened.
We lost your video for a moment, but you're back. We don't want to lose your beautiful face. So,
Okay. Yeah. So and that's what happened, that when we went into that journey, after a few months, we realized that the overall flexibility that we get with this model, like, when I'm, say, for example, if I'm doing performance testing, and at that time I can bump up all the machines and everything, I can change their size to something, so I can control my bill rather than, paying for the fixed thing. I don't have to buy the maintenance of these machines and I don't have to manage the licenses of all the services that I'm using. So that was a big thing. Like it not just the fixed dollars. In terms of my focus on the product, that increases. I can focus on my product more than focusing on the infrastructure, which as a director of engineering, which as a leader of engineering was very, very important for me, because I just didn't want to get bogged down by the details of machines and where they are, all the, to that level, like wherein, like, say, even the power and the air conditioning and their rotation cycles and whether the antivirus is installed and all those things, like that takes away a lot of your bandwidth. And like people who are listening and who are in this side, they would probably agree with me on this. The second point was the managed services bit. Like, so many services are available on these modern cloud platforms. Like if you go to Amazon or if you go to Azure, so many things are available to you as a service, and you just use them. You don't worry about not just installing. You just don't worry about even taking backup. You don't worry about uh, if I need it bigger tomorrow, how I will do it. Like, say, for example, I will take very, very simple instance. We all use databases. No enterprise application usually stands up without a database, right? But the thing is, if I have to do it myself, then I have to worry about not just the machine license and all, how it will run, how it will replicate, how it will be backed up. Is the backup proper? If I want to take, if there is a backup policy, is that getting managed properly? If I want to restore after some time, if I want to move it to a cheaper storage, can I do that? All those things are taken care by the cloud services. So the common services that I felt which were very, very useful for us in that journey were databases, both types actually, and not just a SQL one, but the NoSQL one. Then the caching service like Memcache and Redis, the queuing services. Otherwise, we have to. Sorry about that. Actually, somebody is calling, and at that time it happens.
Oh, that's why your video keeps going out.
Yeah, so
you have to tell them you're on a very important podcast.
Yeah, I just decline it, but till the time it sort of that rings, my video goes off. So yeah, so I was just saying that there were so many services like which we could I could utilize just and that's what people also do. They would look at any cloud and they'll see that there are so many services which I don't even have to worry about installing, building, and all. They are just there. I just go and use them. It's just like plugging your new device into the power socket and the device just works. You don't have to worry about how this device is built.
Right. So you don't have to have the electricity's just there. You don't have to build a whole generating plant to maintain it and do the cool and all that.
Right.
And I put a diagram in the show notes that shows this progression from physical machines to virtual machines to cloud.
Right.
And also, moves on to containers and serverless, which we'll talk about where ColdFusion is going to fit in that in the future. But the whole progression here is less detail of having to do the operating system or the whole setup, so you can focus on the application and delivering wonderful results to your customers.
And yeah, and that's a wonderful point you're making. And in fact, like ColdFusion is almost 24 years old product. And
happy birthday!
No, I don't know whether it's birthdays today or no, but it's almost 24 years old. So at times it's sort of very fulfilling. Like if we just look at those 24 years, and yeah, first and foremost, knowing that it's like really alive, it is making progress. There are so many languages, there are so many platforms which came probably within these 24 years, came and went, but ColdFusion is still staying strong. So that's really a very good feeling. But then we also look at how the world has evolved, and the reference that you made, that's very, very relevant. Like, we see that 20 years ago, maybe everything was on the physical machines. Like, not just you were managing not just your application, you were managing your physical machines. Everything was the problem that you have. Everything was a task that you have to do. Then maybe around 10 years ago, the virtual machines became the mainstream, wherein you don't have to worry about the physical machines, but you have to worry about the machine instances and application servers. And then came the cloud. Like, if I can be a little flexible in saying that, like, last 5 to 7 years, then you just got rid of the machine instances as well. They also became utility, and you started working only on your application servers. 3 years ago, microservices became they came into the being, and people started noticing it. And those application servers actually became containers, wherein you will just break down the functionality into smaller pieces and manage the deployment of the full life cycle just with that container. And we have seen in last 1.5 year, serverless piece taking care, wherein you just worry about the specific functionality that you want. You don't worry about anything else. So the cloud, and it's just magic, right? So you just write the code that you want to do, and everything gets provisioned for you automatically. Like, it's just that, like, that somebody's putting everything together to make your code work, which is like really fascinating from the technology standpoint for me to see. So we think that ColdFusion has played a very strong role when the era was of physical machines and the virtual machines. But now we think that ColdFusion is like really ready, that overall climatic conditions are like really, really favorable for ColdFusion to play a very strong role on cloud, container, and serverless.
That's great. And this is the cutting edge, because I don't think there are many other languages that give this kind of support.
No, like, you have to, the way we are envisaging ColdFusion 2020, it will really allow you to focus on your business logic. The rest of it will be taken care by ColdFusion. A lot of it will be taken care by ColdFusion. It means that ColdFusion will also have to change a lot, but that's what we are working hard to achieve.
Well, that's great. So this will put ColdFusion ahead of the programming language heap, and it's been there on top several times in the last 24 years.
Right.
And I think to be honest, it's near the top of the heap already before you do all this.
Right.
From what we've looked at in all the great things you've got added in ColdFusion 2016 and 2018. Just for rapid application development and ease of use, fast learning, great performance, high security, and many other things. And of course, as you said, it runs on top of Java, so it's enterprise ready. But this takes it to a whole other level here.
Right.
So yeah, go ahead. You wanted to add some more on that, or?
No. This is good. I was just saying, true. You're saying it very rightly, that it still is at the top of heap with all the parameters that are required for an enterprise application, which are critical. But this is a quantum leap, as I say. This is like really taking it into the next level. And
just to check, if people still want to deploy on virtual servers or physical servers, will they still be able to do that in CF 2020? Or?
Yes, of course. Okay, so ColdFusion has always been backward compatible. Like, it has really done a lot to make sure that all the applications developed in the previous versions, they continue to work. So many settings, so many configurations changes have happened, but the previous one will always be supported. So people who wants to stay with the physical machines or virtual machines, they would happily be able to do it. As such, they won't face any challenge or any change with this transition that we are trying to make.
Great. And you made a great diagram that you shared in your keynote at CF Summit East, and I'll put that in the show notes, that shows this progression from physical servers through virtual machines, cloud containers, and serverless. And goodness knows what's going to come in the future after serverless. I'm sure people will think up something there. So maybe we should just talk a bit, because a lot of people currently moving to the cloud, they kind of lock themselves into one cloud vendor. They say, yeah, we're going on AWS or going on Azure or whichever cloud vendor they're into. And they basically lock themselves into Amazon or Microsoft's ecosystem. Is ColdFusion going to work that way, that you get stuck with one cloud vendor? Because I know in the past, ColdFusion has done a great job of saying it doesn't matter what database you use or
Right.
operating system or Java runtime engine. How will this work in the cloud? Well,
So we are going to take the similar philosophy even for the cloud platform. So we want ColdFusion to be a platform which truly supports the multi-cloud application development. So the way we are imagining ColdFusion 2020, it will allow you to develop your application for one cloud and take it to the other cloud transparently. So to start with, we would be focusing more on Amazon and Azure. So those would be the two clouds that we will support. But as we grow, as we go further, we'll add support for other popular clouds. So just to put the things in perspective, we see that these two, Amazon and Azure, together they are more than 2/3 of the market share right now for the ColdFusion developers. So we think that it would give us a very strong start. So ColdFusion being a language, that gives us that strength that we can put that power into the language itself, that you code, you just tell the behavior that you want, and ColdFusion will do the required work for you, the way it has done always, right? So we have seen that the code that you have to write to achieve something in ColdFusion is typically less than 25% of what you would need to do in Java. So that thing stays, that thing progresses. That's what we are trying to do. That to start with, we will do with Amazon, AWS, and Azure. There is a set of services that would be supported out of the box, and of course, we realize that still, you would have a case wherein you are trying to use a specific service or a specific functionality from a cloud, or trying to use an enhanced sort of side of any service which may not be supported on the common platform. So that support will also be there, though it will eventually lock you to that cloud. But if you go with the standard set of parameters which will be exposed across the clouds, you would be able to take the same application and just deploy it on the other cloud. It would work as it is.
Wow. And that's currently pretty hard to do. I'm not aware of a lot of people doing multi-cloud, but there's a lot of desire for that because, I'm sure people remember, AWS was down for a few hours last year. And,
right.
I think Azure has had some issues as well.
Right.
It's great when the cloud vendor gets it right and they're doing all the hardware and operating system updates and they do it okay, but there's always a risk that there's a problem.
There is. That's definitely one point, and the other thing is that's a trick question at times. Say, what's the best architecture for a cloud? Like if you're building an application, what's the best architecture for the cloud? And that's a trick question because the answer is the cheapest, the architecture which gives me the least cost, right? Because it's cloud, right? So once you have these type of capabilities, just imagine what you can do. Actually, you can run your application partly in one cloud and partly in another cloud. So if you figure out that something in Azure is cheaper, say database in Azure is cheaper, while the servers in Amazon are cheaper. So you can still deploy the application in Amazon and you can use the database service from Azure because we work with both.
So I think this whole situation of the multi-cloud where you can have your ColdFusion app easily switch between cloud vendors is very similar to how ColdFusion deals with databases. If you code in generic SQL, you can have the app move between different, relational databases. If you start using, special functions in Oracle pSQL or special functions in Microsoft SQL, then it's not compatible. And the same thing's going to be true here. If you keep it, the common functions and you use this abstraction layer that you're providing, you'll be able to switch easily. If you, use things that are specific to each cloud vendor, and they all have a myriad of services, which we'll talk about later,
Right.
then you're not going to be able to switch quite so easily.
That's very correct, and that's one side of it. The other side that I was trying to tell was that which is actually which goes a little bit more than the database scenario, wherein you can make your applications which is using services from both the clouds. So because you have this abstraction, you can still code a single
Oh,
application. You can
mm-hmm.
do that because that's a when you go with a multi-cloud strategy, actually you can look at, there are two ways to achieve multi-cloud strategy. Like, so one is that you have a single application which you deploy both in Amazon and Azure. That's one strategy, right? The second is that you have an application but it uses the from best services, or the services which are best in the individual cloud, right? So, or cheap, or maybe specific functionality. uh, if, for example, if you want a if you want a MS SQL server as a database which is available in Azure, but you want something else which is just available in AWS, you would be able to do that. So that's the second type of multi-cloud architecture that is coming up common. And in fact, that's what is getting a lot of traction, a lot of highlight, because it really allows you to do stuff, pick the stuff which is best in each of the platform, and still your
Oh,
application working out fully properly.
so this is a kind of best of breed cloud picking
Exactly.
where you can use
Yes.
what's best from Amazon or Microsoft or Google or
Right.
whoever's cloud services you
Right.
want to use.
Yeah.
Now, I think before we go into some more of these technical features in more detail that's coming in CF 2020, let's just talk about the licensing, because I know that has been an issue with ColdFusion 2018 on the cloud. And
Right.
I'm hoping, you've got some plans to, make licensing easier, because the current situation is it's kind of license per instance, I guess, in
Right.
2018. And you have to know how many instances you're going to have, which kind of defeats the whole object of having a cloud setup where
Exactly.
you can scale up and down. And
Right.
a lot of cloud services are priced per hour, or in the case of serverless, per minute. Of use.
Yes.
Is there going to be more flexibility in the cloud
Yes.
licensing in the future?
Yes. So that's a very good question, and unfortunately very complex question also. So uh, but definitely, like when CF 2020 comes out, it will have the right licensing which is suited for the cloud environment, because otherwise whatever else we do, it will defeat the purpose. People will not be able to use the ColdFusion. So we are working on that. There are so we we are leaning towards an activation based model, and yeah, the granularity we are finalizing with the rest of the compliance teams in Adobe, but we are working very actively towards that. This is one of the key pillar of making CF 2020 successful. So this is a key requirement from our side to make CF 2020 successful.
Well, that's great that you're doing that. And, just to be clear to listeners, this is really not so much of a technical issue, though there are technical challenges to
Right.
solve there. It's more of a compliance and legal issue, and keeping all the attorneys
Right.
happy and keeping the European Union happy with all that
Be-
privacy legislation they have, that, you've got to get permission if you're going to give information out on stuff. So
yeah,
it's quite a
right.
complicated thing. So great that you're
Right.
working on getting that solved. And
Right.
also, ColdFusion 2018 already on AWS already has this hourly pricing model, I believe. Is that correct?
Yeah. So there is an AMI for ColdFusion, and actually it's used a lot. So you download the AMI, and the licensing and everything, that pricing is built into that AMI pricing. So you don't have to buy licenses yourself, and also.
Great. Well, I think we should move on to some of these new cool features
Sure.
coming in. So I know one of them is better monitoring in the cloud, because you
Right.
just introduced in 2018 the performance monitor toolset.
Right.
Is that going to expand out into the cloud so you can monitor your whole cloud cluster that's scaling up and down, and I can imagine it's quite a headache to monitor that when you don't know how many
It's
servers you're going to have from
it is.
hour to hour.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. And yeah, the scope of performance monitoring tool set, or PMT as we call it internally, the scope of that is going to expand a lot. So not just the servers or the ColdFusion services that it shows right now. It will have to start showing the stuff from the cloud services as well. Like, say, just imagine some sort of integration with CloudWatch for Amazon and equivalent for Azure. So it would, if say you are using using SQS, so it would show you the stats for SQS so that you can monitor your application end to end in the PMT itself.
And that is that going to be centralized for all the cluster that you're running in the cloud, or?
Right. So that's a model PMT follows. So today also, like if you have built a cluster, so you can monitor your cluster at one place. So it will follow the same paradigm. So you have an application in the cloud, which is basically a cluster. So you would be able to monitor the entire cluster.
Wow. And will that work with, Kubernetes or other orchestration software, where it
Right.
automatically scales?
Right. It will, yes.
Great. And then I know that the Performance Monitor already has some messaging stuff built in, where it can alert you when there's an issue. Is that going to move forward into the cloud too? Or?
Yes. So that we are still elaborating that feature fully, but it would sort of push, it would get the notification support and etc. type of thing. So it can message out to you, but it can do more stuff with the notification stuff, like notifying, using the notification engines that these cloud systems have. They can push out many more things.
Now, I know I saw Alicia give a demo of the performance monitoring tool set at CF Summit East, and there were all kinds of cool features where you could drill down if there was an issue happening. You could find out which piece of code or which SQL statement or which server in your cluster was causing the problem. Is there going to be that kind of powerful ability there? Because I know that's an issue currently with cloud deployment. That's an issue. These servers spin up and down, and maybe the server dies, and it gets automatically restarted by the orchestration software, but it's sometimes hard to get a handle on exactly what's happening inside each of those instances.
Right. So that's what, so all those have to be part of the PMT, because using the PMT should be your one-stop shop for figuring out all the issues with your applications, and be it either the functional side or the performance side or anything, but it should be able to give you the pretty detailed level of diagnostics so that you can take it back to your application and fix it.
Great. Well, that's really exciting, because, we all want to go to the cloud to get all those scaling and cost issues and better technology. But if you can't keep control of the application, it's a little bit like that Disney Fantasia scene where Mickey Mouse, conjures up all these different, cleaning apparatus. I don't know if you've seen this movie. He learns some magic. He doesn't learn it very well, and he ends up with millions of brooms and mops getting out of control.
Yeah,
and the same thing can happen in you've seen that. The same thing can happen in the cloud, because you've got all this ability to scale up, but if you can't monitor it and log it, it's hard to know what the heck's going on up there.
True. Very true.
Now, speaking of logging, is there going to be some way to currently ColdFusion logs a lot of things, but how will that work in the cloud?
So logging, like we are evaluating our strategy. So one of the thought is to give a dedicated logging service along with ColdFusion, but we are still cloud aware, and we know that there are dedicated services like Splunk. They are doing a good job on the logging part of it. So the way we are thinking right now, and specifically for the logging, like this is a little early stage, but how it may evolve as we go is that we give something on the logging, but we also give a good integration with the established logging services like Splunk and all. So when you deploy in the cloud, you bring in your Splunk account, and we can send all the logs to the Splunk also. So because doing the logging is easier, but building the visualization part of it, like, when you have to get into that massive amount of data and find something and do some visualization on top of that, that becomes a very hard problem. And we understand, we acknowledge that there are players who have done it. They already have a good head start on this. So, and being on cloud, that's another beautiful part of cloud, that there are so many services actually which you can use to assemble your solution. So that's the other aspect that we will look into. But there are so many things that we are doing. So some of them are ahead in terms of elaboration, some of them they are yet to take off. So logging is yet to take off fully. So
and how does the API manager fit into that? Will that move into the cloud too? Because that's a really cool feature that a lot of people haven't really checked out in CF 2018 to monitor and control all your API usage.
Yes. And, it becomes even more relevant because we want to be very, very strong on the micro or on the container side, like the microservice side. So microservices, the founding principle for any microservices are the APIs. Like you assemble bunch of functionality with a number of microservices, which is every one of them are bringing their own APIs. So API manager can play a very, very central role in that, like as an orchestrator of the APIs. So there are these bunch of microservices which are built on ColdFusion, deployed in a container service on Amazon or Azure, and then you manage the APIs via the API manager. So that also will be deployable. Today also it is deployable on the cloud, but we think that the role of, more than the functionality or the features, the role of API manager is going to become even more critical when you build this microservice based application.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, because if your whole application is basically a bunch of APIs, whether they're private or they're exposed publicly, your application could get, if you have a public API, you could be being hammered by someone misusing your API. You've really got to, keep track of that. And not only is that affecting performance, but if you've got this in the cloud and it's auto scaling, you could suddenly end up with an enormous cloud bill if you didn't pay attention to that.
Exactly. So all the throttling or monitoring or measuring, so that's why it becomes even more relevant when we go to the cloud, when we go to the microservice architecture.
So let's move on to containers, because a lot of people are moving to containers. Is ColdFusion going to, now more fully support containers like Docker for coding?
Right. So the at present, like, what's the biggest challenge for developing a microservice application on container? The basic challenge is the size. So ColdFusion is so big that it just doesn't fit into the container, and then because it's big, it takes a while to start, which defeats the whole purpose, because in a container, it should be able to start up very fast because you get a burst of load, and a bunch of containers should spawn automatically so that the load is shared and they work perfectly. But so that's like, again, just like the way we talked about licensing, one of the foundational change that we are trying to bring into ColdFusion is we are trying to make it modular. So at present, you get a full server as a single unit, or in classical terms, you get a monolith. What we are trying to do right now, and that's where we are making a lot of progress, because that's a foundational thing, that can we divide ColdFusion into certain modules. And when you are done coding and when you want to deploy, at that time, it just assembles and uses only the modules which are referred in your code. So, for example, if you are not using the document functionality, there is no reason why the code and the classes for PDF or the CFDoc tag should be bundled for you and make your runtime heavy or the overall startup time heavy. That service is no longer required, right? So that's that's one foundational thing that we are doing right now. So there would be a CF core, which is required, or you can say the core CF runtime, and then there would be certain modules which you would be able to assemble your runtime only for the functionality that you're using in your code. So usually, as microservice is a small functionality, it's not that you're writing a lot of logic or a lot of functionality into that. It could be a lot of logic, but the overall functional point wise, it may not be too many. It should not be too many. So it would use something which is like really specific to a task, and then you can just build the ColdFusion runtime which is specific for that task. It would be very small, it would start up very fast, and that's where it would start supporting the microservice or the containers much more in a much more fuller way, or in a much more stronger way.
That is great. And we've had several podcast episodes about using containers, so I'll link those in the show notes. But briefly,
Sure.
why should developers be looking at using containers for their applications? What's the benefit from the development point of view?
So the biggest benefit is you just take a small slice of functionality and you code it in one place, and you assemble the entire functionality by having these small services, and they are called microservices, and then you just deploy them into their own containers. It's just like you take a small functionality and tell that, hey, this is your home, this is where you can expand. Like if you have more load, more containers will come in, but you really don't have to worry about rest of the things. The biggest advantage is like how you can divide your work, and second, how you can maintain it. So if this small function, if some functionality is changing, then you can just change that microservice and deploy it and test it. And the interface between these microservices is always a REST-based API. So you test the API. If the API is working, you can be sure about the entire functionality working. Unlike monolith, wherein you cannot be sure where all the code path would have changed and what all you should test to make sure that the application, nothing has been broken in the application. So that's why it's a big deal for programmers, that not just it gives them much more sort of, what do you call it, uh, uh, certainty into the changes that they are bringing in. It also gives them a lot of agility. Let me take the negative side of it, right? So suppose your application is built using 200 microservices or 50 microservices. You change some microservice, but the thing is, like, the change is not right. So you can just take out that change very easily, because you can take out the new build and just deploy the old build for that microservices. So out of those 200 microservices, 199 have not been even touched. Just one has been touched. So you can be very certain about the impact of change that you are making. And if something goes wrong, it's very easy to bring back, to roll back the system into the previous state. So in a funny way, like, that's what we were thinking, like, say Amazon, it's such a huge site, right? It never goes down, it keeps on working. Don't they have bugs? Of course they have bugs. So that's the model they follow. Like, so the entire site is built up of I think some massive number of microservices, and they follow this continuous integration CI/CD pipeline. So the developer checks the code, checks in the code, the automation passes, and that it's deployed to production automatically. If anything goes wrong, they just redeploy the previous version. That's it. So they can be more risk taking also. They really don't have to go through this long QE cycle to validate something and then push it to production. You can be far more risk taking. That's the speed at which you are moving forward probably becomes 10 times, because you have this flexibility of deploying, and if not, something is not working out, taking it out. So you build robust CI/CD pipeline with very robust automation, and it gives you a lot of scalability to move forward, to lot of scalability and a lot of speed to take your application forward.
I think that's an important enterprise reason why people are moving towards containers and the cloud.
Right.
Because the speed of business just increases every year with more technological and social changes happening. Being able to take small risks, take micro risks, to coin a phrase, with this microservice architecture. And then because you've got the automation where it automatically tests out, it can spin up a test server in the cloud, automatically test it out, run a bunch of automated tests on it, and then you're more confident that, yes, it's going to work well. And I think that's one of the other benefits people see of the cloud, that instead of that having the physical hardware or even the virtual servers with containers, you know that the configuration of your ColdFusion is exactly the same between development and production.
And all. Yeah.
So
that's
and, you know, I know for people using tools like Command Box, you know, you can spin up a new ColdFusion instance, you know, in a container, you know, in seconds. So, you know, compare that to how long it takes to install on you know, physical hardware, which could be days by the time you've ordered the hardware and got it set up. So a major advantage for developers and enterprises here. So you're going to, for the installation, you're going to have a whole new installer here, I guess, right?
Yes.
Because currently isn't ColdFusion quite, you know, on the heavy side? You know, it's about a gig.
It is.
Install. What's your goal for, you know, these micro installations?
So the goal for having the core runtime is, like, we imagine that it would be somewhere like 100 to 150 MB maybe, and we are still, you know, evaluating, because we have done one pass, but then we think that we can divide it further, and we can do that. We can make it even smaller. But for the overall thing, we want to keep, for a normal functionality, everything should be less than 250 MB, so that it fits right into it. And the startup time also will improve so that it starts in like 5 seconds or maybe less. So the load increases, new container comes up, and it's ready to be used in like 5, 6 seconds type of thing. That's the goal we are
Yeah, that's great. So is this something where, you know, the DevOps people or the developers will have to figure out what features they're using and manually make this runtime, or will there be some kind of automatic scanning of the code to see what tags are used, what functions inside your CF script are used?
Yeah. So at present, we are shooting for the automated mode. Like, so you just, in a way, you say that, for the lack of any better term, I'll say just create my package, which I can deploy on the container. So it will just scan your code, build your application, build your ColdFusion runtime for that application, and you will have a package that you can go and deploy on your container. So that's the vision that we have for CF 2020.
So that's a bit similar to the Node Packet Manager that automatically pulls stuff in when it, you know, it detects it.
Right. So something like that. Though we are not going to use NPM, we are looking at something else. But we are working on that. But it would be, in terms of, if you want to draw similarities, yes, it would be something like that.
So this is really advanced stuff, and this will tie in with your automated continuous integration, continuous development tools like Jenkins or whatever.
Like Jenkins, right. So there would be more support on the CI/CD pipeline side. So if you are using Jenkins for your CI/CD pipeline, there would be more tools and commands and everything for making this process automated. So from the check-in to the deployment, you should be able to automate the entire step.
Now, this brings up a question. You know, some of the things in ColdFusion you said in the ColdFusion admin, will that now be scriptable, so that when you're creating these containers, you can?
Yes,
that's great. That alone is a major improvement there.
Right.
So you can have some script, and I'm guessing that script will be ColdFusion Script, I hope.
Yeah. So again, we are looking at. So generally, we would try to give the script in a way which is much more palatable for the DevOps engineer, right? So the DevOps engineers typically are not ColdFusion developer. So they have, so we are trying to see that it is very, very close to the language or the tools or the technologies that they work with. So that's what we are trying to do. But
now talking that makes sense. Now talking of CF Script, what changes are you going to make to the language? Is CF Script going
right,
to change in some
right.
way? And
It will change in a big way. So that's like in the vision I talked about a modern platform, and we believe that a CF Script is now a long overdue for modernization. So uh, we are making ColdFusion Script. We are internally we are calling it CF Script 2.0. We are making it ECMAScript compliant. So the syntax and the usage and everything would be very, very, it would be ECMAScript compliant. So for the practical purposes, it would be very, very close to how you do JavaScript or any other popular scripting, web scripting language. This not just will make it modern, but uh, it will also allow more developers to adopt ColdFusion very easily, because uh, anybody who has coded with JavaScript or such, they would be able to code into ColdFusion also very easily. Uh, in the cloud world, this polyglot programming is also a very common term. I don't know if you have heard about it or no. So which basically says that you can build your application using multiple languages. Like you really don't have to go that classical way of finding out the entire stack that you want to use for your application and just uh, use that. But you build your application using the technology which is much more easier for you. And again, say assume again if you are doing microservices, and microservices are interacting with each other using REST API. So does it matter which language that microservice was developed? No. So you can end up with a system wherein out of 50, 20 microservices are developed using Node, 20 applications are developed using ColdFusion. So that gives a lot of flexibility. So you can pick the language which is right for the job or the best for the job and create the application microservice in that. So ColdFusion will become very competitive there, because now we know that ColdFusion, in terms of the overall productivity, ColdFusion is right at the top. You can develop an application, probably in almost 1/4 time or 1/3 time of what it would take in any other platform like Java or anything. So that's where, like, even with the ECMAS, with the CF Script 2.0, and with the other microservice or the cloud-based stuff that we are trying to do, you would be able to use ColdFusion in your existing applications as well, and enhance the application and take the advantages of what ColdFusion is giving you.
that is great. And, I know one of the issues we've seen in our State of the Union annual ColdFusion survey is difficulty in hiring ColdFusion developers. And so if you can hire anyone who already knows JavaScript, and let's face it, anyone who is a full stack developer knows JavaScript, and then they can be immediately productive in ColdFusion. I think that is great. And I think it's good for existing ColdFusion developers, because instead of now having to know two languages, now you've got basically one language, which is
which is broadly right, which is broadly similar. And not just that, like, if they move to ColdFusion, right now the cloud developers are in very high demand. This is probably the
very
skill
high.
set.
It's basically impossible to hire a cloud developer.
Exactly. So there was a survey, and 94% of the IT managers said that the strategy of the enterprise is moving towards cloud, and they are not able to hire cloud developers. And just imagine, with this one release, all the ColdFusion developers, getting into that pool. So the overall, in terms of upskilling, I think it's huge. It's huge, and they still stay. They can still do ColdFusion. They can do probably other things also, and they are doing cloud. I think it should be a game changer for the existing ColdFusion people plus the newer people who are getting into the ColdFusion, because getting onto the cloud would be so easy with ColdFusion as compared to many other platforms out there.
It's much easier. I mean, there's that site Learn CF in a week. It really is easy to learn. And now with this change to the new scripting, many people who know JavaScript will be able to pick it up. Now, I do have one concern here. If you've got existing CF Script 1.0, for sake of calling it that, code, is it still going to run in ColdFusion 2020 or?
Yes, of course. As I said earlier, also, we are always backward compatible. So this CF, the existing CF script will continue to work. If you are just going to upgrade to CF 2020 and you don't want to take the advantage of newer stuff, it will continue to work. That will be supported fully. There will be no change on that.
Wow. So, and you mentioned earlier that you'll be able to access all the Amazon and Azure services. So what are some of the cool things you'll be able to do from ColdFusion 2020 on that?
Okay. So as you can imagine that this is going to be a long journey and we will have to divide it into milestones. So CF 2020, you can say, is the first step towards that, which will be probably the biggest step that we are going to take in this direction because we are making it cloud capable and all. So as I said earlier also, so in the beginning, ColdFusion 2020, we are looking at supporting Amazon and Azure as the cloud vendor. In that, the abstraction or the uniform interfacing will be provided for the storage services, like all the storage service that like S3 in Amazon and the equivalent in Azure. Pardon, I know much more about Amazon because I have a product there. No disrespect to Azure, and databases like RDS in AWS and in Azure. NoSQL services like DynamoDB or the table in Azure. Caching services, which is Elastic Cache on AWS. And we are also looking at if we can support Redis and all. Then messaging and notification. Messaging, we are trying to start with SQS. Because Kinesis is also there on AWS, and we are seeing, but we will first attack the SQS one because that's the one which is used higher than Kinesis. And finally, the notifications and emailing services, which is all the push notifications or the email services that both of these clouds offer. So the reasoning of choosing these services is that only that most of the apps which are getting built, these are the core components that all of these enterprise services use. So many enterprise services can be built, or so many services or so many applications can be built by just using them. The usage of rest of the services on both the clouds, they are it's very specific. So in the first go in 2020, we want to come out with this, and then we'll be very aggressive in adding rest of the stuff to the ColdFusion platform.
So I know we only got a few minutes left. Let's just briefly talk about configuration and serverless. So
right.
What are you changing on configuration?
Okay. So the configuration, the one of the challenge that we know that all the ColdFusion administrator face is that they have multiple ColdFusion servers, but they want to keep the configuration same. So, but ColdFusion today does not have any centralized configuration server or configuration repository or whatever you might want to call it. So we are looking at ways to push a configuration to each of the server. So if you have a bunch of servers in your cluster and you want to push a configuration to all the servers, you should be able to do that. So that's one big thing that we are trying to do. That's what you asked, right? On the configuration, yeah.
Yep. And then what about serverless? Because that's like the current final frontier.
That's the final frontier.
Yeah, where you're just running Lambda functions or, and you're just being charged for the CPU. The server you don't even care where the server is or what the hardware is. The cloud vendor deals with all of that. You just care that your code gets run efficiently and you get charged per second of use on it. So
right. So there also the modularization bit that I spoke about, that plays the key role, because it will give the bare bone ColdFusion runtime to run your function, because generally on the serverless, what you run is a function. Like, it's not a big piece of code or anything. You run a function which does a specific task. So the whole modularization bit will help ColdFusion to get into the serverless space. Because it has two parts, like just writing the code.
Lose your
plus
sound there.
Oh, okay. I can hear you, all right?
Oh, okay. Well, let's hope it recorded okay.
Okay. I can say it again. I can say it again.
Yeah.
So I was just saying that the whole modularization bit, that will help us in moving to the serverless space, because it will give us the tiny runtime that is required to run the code on the serverless systems like Lambda, and that's where we will be. So the whole modularization bit is being taken care, that it should be really working for the serverless piece as well.
Fabulous. So just to sum all this up, how do you feel about this whole CF 2020 vision?
Oh, I feel incredibly excited. I just can't tell you, like, how. Sorry, again, the battery thing. So I feel incredibly excited. I have a huge respect for ColdFusion as a product, because I saw it going through all the stages throughout my career, because I was associated with JRUN between 2002 to 2006, and ColdFusion 6 came in between and all that. And I have, though not directly responsible for ColdFusion at that time, but I have sort of grown up alongside ColdFusion. And for me, seeing ColdFusion taking such a huge leap is so exciting. And I believe that this is the push that ColdFusion need to become even more competitive and to become even more relevant. We briefly touched upon this thing, that 24 years old history, and so many things have come up and gone, and some of those things actually even ridden very high on the hype cycle, and still they went out, and ColdFusion is still thriving. 70% of the Fortune 500 companies using ColdFusion for their application development, and the number of customers are still growing for ColdFusion. So for me, doing all these things, thinking not just from the newer customer or the newer frontiers, doing this thing for the existing ColdFusion users or the people who believe in ColdFusion, it's so exciting. Like, I just can't explain it in words, but I'm really thrilled.
Well, great. So I know you're going to be at CF Summit West in Las Vegas in October. So if anyone's interested in this, is it okay to come up and talk to you about this? At the summit? Or?
I would love to. I would love to talk to people. I would love to interact with anyone who has any question about ColdFusion, who has any idea about ColdFusion that we can take forward. So, and I would love to sit down and discuss and debate about this vision and this effort that we are putting on ColdFusion. I'm really passionate about it.
Well, that's great. And, I know people can reach out to you. What's the best way for people to reach you online?
The best way for me is my email address, so people can write to me. And my LinkedIn profile, like, if they want to get connected with me, and also they can do so via LinkedIn. I am not so much present on rest of the social medias like Facebook and all. So I have my profile, but I'm not so much there. So on the social media, I think LinkedIn is the best way. Or for one-on-one conversation, email is best way, because I'm based out of India. So for most of the people, the time zone may not work very nicely. So email is the best way to reach out to me, and then we'll take the conversation from there, and we'll get together the way we are talking now. So we can set up some time and talk about ColdFusion.
So we'll put your LinkedIn profile and your email in the show notes so people can reach out to you.
Sure.
And we'll look forward to seeing you at CF Summit. Very exciting this year. Last year there were like roughly 500 CF developers and CIOs and other folks there.
It was the biggest ever, right?
Yeah.
It was the biggest ever, and again, that's what keeps on. We keep on wondering. We keep on feeling humbled that, in spite of 24 years of age, still it is growing. We are able to grow the product. We are able to grow the revenue. We are able to grow the excitement. Like 500 people coming in to attend, and probably this year in the CF Summit West, we are launching the ColdFusion certification program. So people
I just talked with Alicia Jaborak all about the details of that. Very exciting training. So I'll link the episode on that as well. So lots of exciting things happening. I'm really interested in how Adobe's moving forward. ColdFusion really making it more alive this year with all these microservice and multi-cloud improvements that we talked about today.
Yes.
So fabulous. Well, I know you've got to go home for dinner. It's pretty late there in India. So thanks so much for coming on the CF Live podcast, and look forward to seeing you in Las Vegas.
Yeah, sure. And thank you so much for giving me this opportunity. It is really wonderful communicating with you, and I really enjoyed the show. Thank you so much.